Back again for another video. So, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine here recently, and it was one of those epiphany stages that was right in front of your faces. Right in front of your face. It was right there. It's been there the whole time. I believe this is a universal law when it comes to how we experience our reality. Because I've mentioned before that, sometimes the answers that you're looking for have been right in front of your face. You just have to sit down and think about where they are. It's kind of like losing your keys. Just sit down and think about it, and poof, they're right in front of you. And this is kind of one of those moments. So the conversation was about women, of course. Most times when I have lengthy, long conversations, they're about politics, science, mostly science. To be honest, it's mostly science, religion, pretty much all the hot button stuff that people talk about. But I have people that I can have these conversations with, and it didn't degrade into a yelling match or hurt feelings, etc. But anyway, the conversation was about masculinity and how it applies to women. It was talking about the so-called educated lane. Oh, before I get into that, y'all subscribe to my my other channel. It's called Wolf and Alpha Attire. I do completely different content than I do here. Yeah, so about that, you'll have to go over there to see it. But the conversation was about how masculinity applies to women. And the conversation veered off into the educated lame debate and the higher levels of masculinity that black men have over other races. And the specific race that we were contrasting was white men versus black men. And the communities respectively as it applies to women. So we were talking about how the educated lames are very accepting by white women because of the propensity for them to view the black males that come over to their side of the territory as males of high masculinity. Whereas those very males would not be viewed, not saying that they aren't, because I don't know every guy, but most times they are not viewed by the other males as being the top masculine male, and neither viewed by the women as being the top masculine male within their environment or community. And then that's when the spark happened, because the conversation was not necessarily talking about where my spark came from. It was mostly talking about the aspect of what would happen, when a male meets a female from another race, versus what happens within our community. But my spark, it came from that conversation, and it goes as such. So I thought in my head, well, if the educated lane, he stays predominantly, if he goes to another community, he stays predominantly within that community, if the community is not one of ethnic background, as far as the darker shades goes. It's kind of like the lighter the shade, the more he stays within that community and doesn't veer back to his own. And I thought, okay, if this guy were to come back with his white girl to the hood, she'd probably be smashing all the niggas, because the masculinity is different. It's a different scale when you bring that woman back, especially if she came to you for masculinity. Now, this is one thing you also have to consider, that there are two types of hypergamy. I didn't really put it in perspective that way until this conversation. Although intrinsically, I kind of understood that without verbalizing it. But what happens is, because I've seen it many times, where these dudes, they bring back, and it didn't even have to be educated lame, so-called. It can be just a regular guy. Most guys are regular guys. We don't, everything is not of streams when it comes to a stable environment. So the majority of men are normal. So let's say a normal guy, met a white girl, brought her back to the hood. She would then see that there are different types and different scales of masculinity compared to her own community. Because let's face it, a lot of parts of the white community didn't have the same type and brand of masculinity that we have within the black community. Now, whether that's better or more stronger or not, I don't know. I met plenty of masculine white dudes, but for the most part, most white dudes that I met are not masculine at all. They're kind of the base range. If you want to compare the white normal white guy to the black normal black guy, usually the black guy has a higher level of masculinity due to his environment. Masculinity is definitely a muscle. You have to exercise it in order to grow it. And within the white community, there are no adversities that require you to exercise your masculinity to such a point that it will outclass other communities, for the most part. Because let's face it, the dominant society is probably one of the safest societies within their own communities. But anyways, so this guy, he brings it back, and she starts to see that there's other masculine men, more masculine. That's when hypergamy kicks in. But BGS says something that was very interesting to me. And this is, once again, something that's right in front of your face that you just hadn't considered. And the interesting part of it is that he said that black women go for white men because of the resources, and white women go for black men because of the masculinity. Now, some people could argue this, but let's be frank about that. And the reason why this is mostly true is because of the opposition that makes it true. The oppositional thought of that is that, or the other side of the coin of that is that within, once again, the white community, they don't have high levels of masculinity like they do in the black community. So for a white woman to come to a black community, she would see a whole different atmosphere that is nothing like she knew when she grew up. And this is what her affinity is usually when it comes to black men. It isn't necessarily the resources, because her community elicits a lot of men who have high resources and high gaining or earning potential. So she's used to that. That's normal to her. Whereas on the other side of the fence, when it comes to black men, we don't have a high earning potential. I mean, I think the single black man makes about on average $30,000 a year, and that's not a lot when it comes to what the average pay is for certain communities, especially the white community. A white household is, I think, averaged around about 200,000 or something like that, and that's a household including the wife or whatever. But I don't know. I'm sure the lower tier of it, which would be a single white male, not excluding the white female, but the single white male, he probably would make about 100,000, something like that average. I don't know the numbers. I don't have them right in front of me, but that dawned on me that he said that white women come to the black community for masculinity, and black women come to the white community for resources. And there it is. There's the answer right there. There are two types of hypergamy. And where I was going with the thought when it came to the guy, bringing a white woman to the hood, she's going to, mostly practice her hypergamy behind masculinity. She's going to go after the the higher masculine man. That's what hypergamy is. And you know, I was having this conversation. I was explaining this to a friend of mine, and she was saying to me, like, you know, that's very true, but it didn't used to be that way. Masculinity and masculinity and resources were one and the same when it came to an individual man, because it used to be that the highest masculine man normally was the highest paid man when it came to the communities at the time, you know, because let's think about the knights class, you know, let's think about the samurai, you know, let's think about the Vikings. All these men were high paid men for the positions that they did, which happened to be very masculine because they were necessary for the economy that they were going through at that time. But anyways, let's revisit the definition of hypergamy. It says the action of marrying a person of a superior caste or class. Now let's go back to the whole thought of it. There are two different types of hypergamy, and nowadays we function in a duality sense, which could be broken down to an individual portion of that duality within women, because they are rarely men who have both masculinity and resources to a high degree. We are on tipping scales when it comes to the differences between resources and masculinity, respectively, to the white community and the black community. This is also why the broader scale of that, let's really think about it. The reason why it made me think about that, because I was like, where have I seen this before? Where have I seen this before? This duality of hypergamy. Where have I seen this? We hear it all the time. When a person from the United States goes to another country, he marries a woman over there. She's within our community. If he stays there, he has a higher chance of retaining that woman, right? What happens when she comes back to the United States? He more than likely loses her to someone who has more resources than he does. This is why the whole Pookie and Ray Ray and Educated Lane theory stands. It's pivoted off of women, but this is a feminine talking point. But I believe that there is a certain truth to feminism, because it sounds more like, if I were to put feminism to a tone or to a certain aspect of expression rather than an overall rhetoric, it sounds to me like an outcry. That's what it sounds to me. I don't know what other men are hearing, but that's what I hear. When I hear feminism speak its rhetoric, it sounds like a cry for things to be forced upon them, for them to be put into a position where they don't have any choice but to conform. I mean, BGS says it all the time, you know, women react to the environment. But with the reaction that we have now, we look at feminism as being autonomous, but that isn't true according to his hypothesis. The environment is what is driving feminism. So therefore, if men created the environment, we also created the drive for feminism, in my opinion. Collectively, not individually, of course. But I just want to lay that on you guys. And women, there are two different types of hypergamy. There's a hypergamy behind masculinity, and there's a hypergamy behind resources. I mean, because there are different castes and classes of masculinity within the black community when it comes to the black man compared to other or compared to themselves. We can definitely say that. And we can also say that there are different castes and class when it comes to the resources that one has within the black community. But like I said, on average, you can expect most black men to be poor. Whereas if you go to the white community, there are caste and class respectively for resources and masculinity. But on average, you can expect white men to have a lower tier of masculinity. Interesting thought, huh? But anyways, I just wanted to lay that on you guys. It was a conversation that was on my mind, and it is a fundamental, because these are the two things that drive what we are as humans today. The hypergamy behind masculinity and the hypergamy behind resources, because we seen that break when agriculture first popped up. That's when resources started to be accumulated by one male, and it was not a community activity when it broke out to individual agriculture. But anyways, this has been the Wolf and Beta Close. May you have a good day, and peace be with you.